you knew.
The marriage rights in particular. Why is it important in a world where hetero people are actually running away from marriages?
I'll give you one very concrete example.
Okay.
In Kerala very recently, the hospital said, we can't release the body to you because you're not related to the boyfriend. And he couldn't get the partner, he couldn't get the body. And the parents didn't want the body. That the violence against the transgender community was a unquestioned part of the reality.
Yeah.
Till that time. Once that became big news, every police officer, as the police would say, bidrappa avarella bartara, esto jana bartara. You leave them, if you don't go after them, so many people will come. In a press conference, addressed by Gauri Lankesh as well as BT Venkatesh, they named the police officers. He said, see, it doesn't matter what happens in court.
Yeah.
Their names are there in every newspaper. This is humiliation of a sort.
Yeah.
Which is result. You know?
Yeah. Are there people, you would say that people are now more accepting now that the law allows it? Do you think that the society has become more accepting?
See, I think the law opens out a space.
Yeah.
Space for struggle. In the sense that...
Space for struggle. I like the way you put it.
So you don't have a right to meet your partner. Because you don't come within the definition of a family member. A lot of people, right? When you say LGBTQ community, people think of sex.
Yeah.
But they don't think of forms of life. People living together, people doing different things together, people engaging in different forms of activity, etc.
Yeah.
So that I think that sexuality becomes a big barrier to actually understanding who the people underlying that sexuality. So that's the biggest misconception, which I think still exists. When the law is against you, you have to hold on and say, the idea of equality is only a dreamed effort and it will explode.
Right now, I am so happy because the guest that I'll be calling upon today, without him, this entire Pride Month special, I Wish You Knew, would not have been possible. On Superhits 93.5 Red FM, this is Red Adda, mere yani Priya ke saath. And at the Red FM studios today, I've got Mr. Arvind Narrain, who's a human rights lawyer, an activist, a TEDx speaker, but most of all, he is also one of the founders of ALF, which is Alternate Law Firm. And he's also been a part of the team of lawyers who have fought against the 377 section of IPC that finally decriminalized by the Supreme Court. So welcome to Red FM, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
This Pride Month special is called I Wish You Knew. And as someone who has literally fought for the people who have been going through these struggles, I want to start off with the first question, which is, what are the top 3 things you wish people knew about the Pride community?
It's a great question to ask. I think one way of putting it is, I think since I'm sure, Priya, you also have queer friends and gay friends.
I do.
Etc. Yeah. Right? So you'll see one point you'll get is, I think, a sense of joy from members of the queer community.
Yeah.
In spite of the oppression or the difficulty, you always come out with a sense of laughter at some joke or something which people share about their lives or the way they look at the world at large. The second thing I think, which I think is very important, is recently actually I was in an event in the Bengaluru International Center, which is the release of a book by Arundhati Ghosh, called it was on multiple relationships. Okay. It was an idea. It was on polyamory. It was on polyamory. And I kind of thought any kind of queer event, generally speaking, there might be 50 people, 30 people, etc. Right? This event was jam-packed. Okay. 100 plus people. Yeah. And what I realized is that's because the sexuality conversation is not just a conversation with the LGBTQ community. It's a conversation about all of us. The right to love is not just the right for the LGBTQ community, it's the right for all of us. So what you should learn from the LGBTQ community is to follow your heart, is to follow your desires, and challenge social conventions and strictures when they try to confine your right to love.
That is beautiful. Now, if I'm counting correct, that's two things. What's one more thing?
Yeah, that is... thanks, Priya, again for pointing out to the fact that there's one missing. The third one, I would say, is the community also grows up in the initial sense with a sense of loneliness.
Yeah.
In the sense that you feel that you're the only one in the world. There's nobody else who has these desires that you have. So which enables a certain kind of a reflective quality on life, which enables people to think a little more deeply about things which matter, and enables you to say, hey, you know, the small things actually matter a lot. I'll give you one example on this. I think similar Pride Month, 17 years ago, maybe the first, second or third Pride, I don't remember, there was a filmmaking competition which was done by the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
And the film by the two women which won the prize, I think, at that time.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful film, but did only one thing. It spoke about what it was to live your life with each other within the confines of the home. The entire film was about cooking together, was about doing different things together.
Yeah.
And then they said that, you know, this is a life we don't have. The life we really desire. The life that we want. So the point from this again, the lesson everybody needs to take is to appreciate the small things in life. They're actually very precious.
How sweet. Okay. So now let me put it across like this. What made you choose this path of fighting for people who cannot fight for themselves, or being a voice of people who feel different?
Yeah, no, I think the story goes back a long time ago.
Yeah.
To the National Law School, where I was a student, many years ago. And when I was a student there, I was not out as being gay at that moment in time. And my memory then is I'd spoken to a very close friend of mine, and we had kind of decided to work together on an article on gay rights, because if you work on an article, that becomes a way in which you build your CV. So he was very interested, very excited.
Yeah.
So we started working on this article. In the course of working on the article, sitting in the library.
Yeah.
When we were talking about, I still remember reading the Harvard Journal on sexual orientation and the law. And my friend turned around and asked me, "Can you imagine being gay? Can you imagine sleeping with another man?"
Oh, okay.
So I said, "Yes, I can." He said, "Are you gay?" I said, "Yes, I am." And this is still the most remarkable friend I've ever had in my life.
Was it the first time?
First time.
You openly accepted this?
Yeah. And his response was within a week. He said, "Let's organize a seminar on gay rights." And we did organize a seminar on gay rights. And so from that, what I learned is that, the identity is a very important thing. But there's always these types of solidarity which are possible. Like you were just telling me how your close friends are gay, right?
Yeah.
And so in that sense, the Pride Month is really built on the labor not just of the queer community, but of people who are supporters and allies as well. So they're a very important part of the grouping as well. So if you ask me why, I'd say that, the question of marginalization, if you feel it personally, you feel you have to fight for it. But at the same time, my friend's example is this. Whether you feel it personally or not, if somebody you love feels it, somebody you care for feels that marginalization, you will feel impelled to fight for it.
Nice. So I think from this, the takeaway is, if you tell the right person, I don't know, or whoever you choose to tell the very first time, their reaction sort of has an impact on you. And the fact that your friend not just accepted it or, did not react on it or anything, he literally told you that let's organize a seminar. Yeah. Do you think that made a big difference?
I think so. I think it makes a big difference to have supportive friends, supportive family, which really helps your own ability to flourish and to grow and to be the person that you are. So I've always said, I always believed, in fact, I believe that I think courage is a social thing.
Yeah.
Courage is not an individual quality alone. It emerges from the fact that you're supported, that you're welcomed, that people value what you say. And out of that comes the ability to articulate and to be who you are. So any person who says, "Oh, that's very courageous," my response is actually no. It depends on the range of people around you. So it's a collective process that results in who you are.
So like you said, this happened many years ago. And you were one of the key people who, fought against the Section 377. Can you take me through that process? What was happening within you, within the community, and what it meant for you in the courtroom?
Yeah, again, as you said, it's a long story, but very briefly put, when we founded the Alternative Law Forum, we said we're going to work on a range of human rights issues, including LGBTQ rights.
Yeah.
And clearly a part of that entire struggle was the struggle against Section 377 of the IPC.
Yeah.
And we began our work as a socio-legal struggle, where part of it is you fight the law within courts. But the other part is, of course, building a larger public opinion against the law.
Yeah.
So we did, in the course of my work, we did a range of publications or writings on LGBTQ rights, including the first we published an anthology called Because I Have a Voice, queer perspective, queer voices, as it were.
Yeah.
Then we did a lot more writing on the law. We also did a range of meetings and discussions on taking the question of sexuality to a wider audience, and we took up the battle within the courts itself. So the battle against 377 was not just a battle against a provision of the law.
Yeah.
It was really a battle for a wider sense of freedom from the strictures of gender and sexuality. And that's the way we saw it. And again, there's a long story, of course, of the battle.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go through that? Or? Okay.
Well,
you ask a question.
I think I want to first understand what exactly was Section 377 from a legal perspective. Like, we all know very superficially, but exactly what did it criminalize?
Yeah. So if you look at the Indian Penal Code, it's divided into sections. It's called offences against the property, offences against the body, offences against marriage, etc. Offences against the body, there's of course murder, there's rape, which is 376, and 377 is what is titled unnatural offence. And the way the law reads, it says whoever has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal shall be punishable with imprisonment up to 10 years. That's the way the law reads.
Okay.
Of course, for a non-lawyer, even for a lawyer, the question is, what do you mean by carnal intercourse against the order of nature? Such a quaint English expression. What does it mean? Right? It's nobody knows what it means. But the court, in its interpretation, has said that carnal is the opposite of natural. So it's a unnatural kind of a expression of sex or sexuality. And what is carnal intercourse? The court judicial interpretation over a period of time, oral sex and anal sex come within the framework of carnal intercourse against the order of nature. That's the more, at a technical level, that's what the law criminalizes.
Okay.
But I think the more important point is the law ends up targeting people whose lives are not normative in terms of sexual expression.
Okay.
And of course, sexual expression is linked to identity and selfhood. So in a sense, the law, though it talks about acts, it's really about criminalization of sexual identities or queer identities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons' identities and ability to express themselves. Again, when we talk about sexual expression, what do you mean by sexual expression? Right?
Yeah.
Sexual expression is a part of the human right to expression. It's part of the human right to intimacy. It's about the human right to connection, with the right to love. So there's a way in which sex and love really come together. So that would be my short answer. Yeah.
Okay, so that is Section 377. And as you were saying, there is a long form answer. Feel free to tell me what exactly was the breaking point. Where exactly did you think that we are now getting to the point that we can actually win this?
Actually, if you'd asked me in 2000 or even 2004, 2005, will Section 377 go in your lifetime? I would have said no chance, because it's such a tough battle. There's no chance. Yeah. Absolutely no chance.
You're working with a set of orthodox people, right, at the panel as well. Yeah.
So I was. Then people ask you, why are you doing this? I'd say that it's your gesture towards the future, because you build a base on which other struggles can build. And the law will go one day. I was convinced it will go one day, but not in my lifetime. Was my thought. Not in my lifetime.
Okay.
And I plan to live to 100 years, so it's a long lifetime.
I love that.
So we were as much taken by surprise as anybody else when the Delhi High Court in 2009 delivered the judgment that it did. The only time we got an inkling that things were different was the form of questioning which the judges engaged in.
Okay.
They were asking questions. When you were talking about the law being called into course against the order of nature, their entire interest was how did it impact the right to dignity. So I was like, wow, these judges are several steps ahead of us, several steps ahead of us.
And what
they
was
got
your answer?
Everything.
Yeah.
The answer was this actually. The senior counsel, Shram Diwan, was making the argument on behalf of Voices Against 377. Justice Shah asked him the question. Justice Shah asked the question. He said, Counsel, as far as Article 21, the right to life, is concerned, one of the limitations can be the entire question of public morality. So surely the law is a legitimate infringement of the right to life when you want to protect the right to public morality. To which Mr. Shandivan's response was, he said, we understand that there are reasonable restrictions or there are restrictions to the right to life, but the right to dignity is so integral to a human person that you can't restrict the right to dignity. Under no circumstances can you take away the right to dignity. Give you an example again. If you're talking about people in prison, of course, you can restrict the right to movement. But even if you're in prison, you still have the right to dignity. Similarly, even if you're an LGBTQ person, you still have the right to dignity. And the fundamental argument is this. 377, by interfering with the key dimension of the human being, which is your ability to engage in sexual expression and sexual intimacy, actually hits at the core of what it means to be human. Because your right to express who you are is tampered with or is infringed by this particular law in its most intimate sense. Again, what do you mean by sexuality? Sexuality is a sphere of human intimacy. What is sexuality really about? It's about your ability to establish ties, or sexual expression is about your ability to express ties with people that you love. It might be an expression, it might be a form of expression of love.
Yeah.
And if you're going to cut down on that, if you're going to say, hey, you can only love, man can only love woman, woman can only love man, man can't love man, woman can't love woman, then what you're in effect infringing is the right to dignity. Because dignity is about my choice, your intimate choice. Area so intimate to me that the state is coming and saying you can't love a person of your choice. If that's not an infringement of dignity, what is?
So that was the point where you saw that, okay, this is going somewhere, because the questions became the right kind of questions. Okay, superb. Would you think they were judgmental, the people who were sitting at the panel, who were supposed to give out the judgment?
They were again, there were many judges who had been through.
Yeah.
Going back to 2009, the two judges were incredible judges, both Justice Shah and Justice Mulidhar. They heard everything we had to say, they understood everything we had to say, and they had a sense of empathy. In fact, I remember one moment when the government counsel at that time was a little negative in terms of he made some kind of a negative comments. And Justice Shah made a very perceptive and very sensitive comment. He said, he told the additional Solicitor General that, Mr. Counsel, we speak about the issue of sexuality often in terms of by the water cooler. It's a certain kinds of conversations which happen. Those are not the conversations we really want to encourage. So he got a very subtle point, which is the fact that where is the bias and prejudice in terms of sexuality actually reinforced? It's not reinforced in a public, may not always be reinforced in a public space. Now, for example, in the public space, everybody will say, yes, we support. But then you get to the water cooler, you get to the cigarette break, that's where the prejudices are expressed and get reinforced. So that's and he got that point. When he said that, I said, this judge is extraordinary by any stretch of imagination.
What about following this? There were other battles as well, the marriage rights in particular. How important is it for the community, and why is it important in a world where hetero people are actually running away from marriages?
No, again, that's a great question.
Yeah.
It's really a great question. And I think to put it this way, I think there are a range of perspectives on the question of marriage.
Yeah.
Right? And you can put it in terms of the idea of marriage, the idea of relationship recognition, the idea of the recognition 2 people or 3 people to live together.
Yeah.
So that's one kind of a question.
Yeah.
The other way of framing it is what one is advocating for is what you call marriage equality.
Okay.
By which you mean simply if 2 straight people have a right to get married, 2 gay people should have the right to get married. That's just at the fundamental level of just equality.
Yeah.
But the question you're raising is still a very important one. You're saying that are there ways you can imagine relationships between people which is not bounded by the laws of marriage?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. That's a very fundamental imperative of the queer community, which is to challenge these norms which govern the way people relate to each other. So there's always a section of the community which wants to push the boundaries and take this institution apart and find new ways to live together and establish what a philosopher called Stanley Cavell called establish little communities of love. Whether
little communities of love, nice.
Yeah? But that's one level, and I think that struggle should continue.
Yeah.
But I think my sense of complete support for the marriage equality battle, I know there are many debates on this, but my complete support for this battle is based on the principle of equality. I'm saying if 2 people can get married, they have that right. 2 people who are gay or lesbian have the same right. It may be a mistake, it may be an oppressive institution, but if 2 people have the right, who are straight, 2 people who are gay have the right in law. You can't deny them that right. They have the right to make the same mistake which straight people have made.
Yeah, and whether they want to opt for it or not is based on the individual. They can, weigh their pros and cons and then go through with it. Is there something specific, like a benefit that married people get?
Yeah, no, that's another point to make actually.
Yeah.
One is this entire question of the question of marriage versus against marriage.
Yeah.
The other is the question, as you rightly put it, we don't think of marriage in this broader frame, as it were. We think of it as a bundle of rights.
Yeah.
And marriage confers a bundle of rights which are very specific. It could be right from the question of inheritance to the entire question of, in filing joint income tax returns, to the question of gifts, where with exempt from taxation, we gift to each other, etc.
When people get married, the gifts that they receive. Okay.
And maybe the big point would be in questions of crisis. Right?
Okay.
That is the big question. Assuming that, for example, you're married and then your partner is in the hospital.
Yeah.
And needs life-saving treatment, and decisions need to be made, right? Whether the surgery can be performed or not.
Yeah.
Because that would really determine. Very critical question.
Yeah, yeah.
And a person who's married has a right to make those decisions.
Okay.
You're not married, you don't have that right. It's a big point. I'll give you one very concrete example.
Okay.
In Kerala, very recently, there was the case of 2 gay men, and one of them died in a tragic accident by falling off the roof, and so the other partner took him to the hospital, and unfortunately passed away in the hospital, and then he wanted to take the body home, right, to perform the last rites and to pay his respects to his partner, and the hospital said, we can't release the body to you because you're not related to the boyfriend. And he couldn't get the partner, he couldn't get the body. And the parents didn't want the body. So you see the dilemma in which puts people.
That makes me sad.
It is very, very sad. So you get a sense of, again, the concreteness, right, of the rights conferred by marriage. Which is why when people say they want to get married, they're not always making an ideological point.
Yeah.
It's very, in a sense, it's a very concrete kind of a question which they're raising, which is, hey, the range of rights which are vital for any human being. And we want to have those rights as well.
Thank you so much for actually sharing that example, because at one side, you have a whole family who, for whatever reason, samaj mein na kar, whatever, they discard them from their family. And then the legal system also does not support them in cases like this. And I think that is where I wish more and more people knew about this, because this is what they are fighting for. Yeah. This is what the fight is against. This is why the equality is required to be able to love whoever you want to love. Is there a particular case that you have fought for that has ever stayed with you emotionally, like apart from these bigger battles?
I think some of the cases which I've been part of, as you rightly indicated, they've not been the big matters, but they've had huge implications. Give you one example, for example, or one case, for example, was the rape of this transgender person called Kokila in a police station in Bengaluru. And that led to, again, a kind of the point I keep making is we see the law as a socio-legal process.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a case which became a case in court. But became a case as in terms of FIR registered. We demanded action against the police officers.
Yeah.
Protests and demonstrations happened around, and the issue was taken up even at the international level. Right? And so the implications of that is after that the violence against the transgender community came down quite dramatically. The police, for example, because again the Kokila mobilization indicated to the police that if they inflict these forms of violence, the community will rise up.
Yeah.
And that is something which is very difficult for the police to deal with.
Yeah.
Because as the police will say, bidrappa avarano, avarella bartara, esto jana bartara avella. You leave them, if you don't go after them, so many people will come. In 12 o'clock at night, there'll be 20 people coming, 30 people coming, etc. Right? So that kind of a Kokila case was a big case, if you think of it from that point of view.
And what was the outcome of that case?
Okay, see, it's interesting. So the outcome was, I think it was more, it can't be put in a very concrete sense, but it's still very concrete, which is the idea that the violence against the transgender community was a unquestioned part of the reality.
Yeah.
Till that time. Once that became big news, every police officer knew that this kind of violence will result in a backlash.
Did the bad guys get what they deserved?
Good question. Again, in this case, in my memory of it is in a press conference. It is by Gauri Lankesh as well as BT Venkatesh. They named the police officers. These are the police officers responsible for the violence. And as Mr. Venkatesh said, it's very, very perceptive comment. He said, see, it doesn't matter what happens in court.
Yeah.
Their names are there in every newspaper. This is humiliation of a sort.
Yeah.
Which is result.
Yeah.
In the fact that nobody will want to do this ever again. So that
they are the wrongdoers in the eyes of the public, which matters the most. Because at court levels there are multiple ways people get influenced, but when you are talking about the public eye, I think that's where you have the biggest win. Don't men also undergo sexual harassment and things like that? There have been cases like that. So the law doesn't protect men as well?
The law doesn't protect men as well, you're right. And there's a long history to this. The women's movement is argued, and I think rightly as well, which is the question that, men are often the perpetrators of sexual violence and rape. And if you make the law completely gender neutral, then you give men another tool to harass women. That's the argument put forward of the women's groups, which has some basis of truth to it. Okay. But the argument on the other side is when this category of gender and sexuality has become so complicated, then we're in a different space. We're not in that space where the only person to be protected are women, within quotes, women who are biological women. The transgender people who have been the subjects of sexual violence, shouldn't they deserve protection as well? So the Verma Committee, for example, their recommendation is with respect to the rape law, victim should be gender neutral, let the perpetrator be male. So that's a kind of a via media compromise formula which they came up with. But that's the Verma Committee. The law, the latest Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, which is, which came after so many years. Again, this is a shame as far as the central government is concerned. Till today, that law doesn't protect all persons. They should have taken at the least the concerns of the community on board and modified or changed the rape law to protect all persons from sexual violence. So again, we see the idea that the rape law reform was really an eyewash.
I did not know this at all until we had this conversation. And probably as the talks go forward, maybe more awareness can bring this to light. All right. So have you ever seen a sort of difference between, like, if the law changes on paper, but it's very difficult to imply it as well, right, at the same time? So have you ever seen an example of the legal rights being there, but it is not being practiced in the reality? Something like that?
There are a number of examples of this, where you say that the law has changed at the level of the statute.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change because social attitudes may be still very hardened, may not be very receptive to the question of LGBTQ rights. Give a simple example. If the law says it's not a criminal, same-sex relationships are not a criminal offense, parents might still say, oh, what you're doing is unnatural. So we will not accept this. So that change is still to happen. Give you a very, very concrete example. Is post the Navtej judgment of decriminalisation in 2018, there have been over 40 reported judgments of the high courts of either lesbian couples or transgender couples running away from home to get married. And the entire point is this. Why are they running away from home? Because the parents want to arrest or want to inflict violence on one of the partners. So that tells you that it's very challenging for social attitudes to change. Again, the point is simply this, right? We have to view the struggle against the law as a struggle to change social attitudes and mindsets, most fundamentally. So that's why when I spoke again of the 377, it's not a question of carnal intercourse alone. That's what the law says. So criminalizing an identity and sense of self and a sense of a person's right to express themselves. So we need to be able to communicate that to a wider public, as it were. So that's when change will happen. When the message goes out that the change in the law should result in a change in mindsets as well.
What about other little basic things like finding a place to live, or maybe you want to celebrate your anniversary and things like that? Are there people, you would say that people are now more accepting now that the law allows it? Do you think that the society has become more accepting?
See, I think the law opens out a space. A space for struggle. In the sense that...
Space for struggle. I like the way you put it. Okay.
Yeah, in the sense that today, right? You're not fighting with your hands tied behind your back. Right? So you have the ability to say, hey, the law is on my side. So you must recognize there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. And that's a very important starting point, because people then don't feel a sense of shame. That we're doing something wrong. The shame is on the other side, saying you're doing something wrong. And that's a great
because the law is on our side. Nice. What are some of the rights that LGBTQ plus individuals still don't enjoy, apart from the ones that we've discussed already? Are there anything?
I think there's a lot out there in terms of rights which the LGBTQ community still does not enjoy.
We've covered rape and we've covered marriages. That there is a gap over there. Apart from that,
that is broadly put the relationship recognition, even if it's not marriage. That's one part. One part, and rights which flow out of relationships, which could be the entire question of right from insurance to a range of other rights. The rights, for example, even smaller, very, very big things actually. Assuming your partner's in prison, you don't want that to anybody, but assuming that's so, right? The prison manual allows for visits by family members, so you don't have a right to meet your partner because you don't come within the definition of a family member. Right? And assuming this entire question of even the laws with respect to injury, right? Workman's compensation. When people are injured in industrial accidents. And sadly, people end up dying, right? The dependents are entitled to compensation. Who are dependents? Dependents again are defined in terms of relationship by blood and marriage. Right? So a range of rights is really depend critically on this relationship recognition. In fact, your entire edifice of civil law is built upon this point. The fact that you recognize this relationship of two people as marriage. So that's why we go back to the question of marriage is not just a...
It's not just like a legal binding that, I've got a certificate, but no, it comes with a bundle of rights, like you said.
Bundle of rights. And that's the critical, really, really critical point.
Okay. Can you think of any misconceptions about having, about the LGBTQ plus rights in our country? Have people had misconceptions in your experience?
Actually, it's a good question. One misconception to point out to you is a misconception held by a judge of the Madras High Court called Justice Anand Venkatesh. And the case he was adjudicating was a case of two women who had run away. That was the case he was dealing with. Right?
Okay.
And one of the most incredibly sensitive judges we have ever had. Because at one point in time, he said that, see, I don't understand the nature of a relationship between two women. I don't understand it.
He doesn't understand it.
I don't understand it.
Okay.
So he said, I'm going to go for a session with a counselor to understand it. A judge is saying this.
Okay.
So he goes for the session with the counselor.
Yeah.
And then he documents what he learned through that session. He says, the misconception I had was that a lesbian relationship was about sex. The misconception I had.
Okay.
After that conversation, I realized it's like a relationship like anything else. It's actually about love. So he said that to me captures something. A lot of people, right? When you say LGBTQ community, people think of sex.
Yeah.
But they don't think of forms of life. People living together, people doing different things together, people engaging in different forms of activity, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So that I think that sexuality becomes a big barrier to actually understanding who the people underlying that sexuality. So that's the biggest misconception, which I think still exists.
I like the way the judge handled this to be a judge and to take this route. That I don't understand what this is, so I'm going to take a medical help to understand this.
Incredible. Judges are often seen as the least dialogic grouping, and look at this judge. He's the most incredible. I mean, what an incredible judge.
Beyond the policies and the legal rights and everything, how do you think the society can make a change as an individual, maybe, to be more pride positive?
Because sexuality is a part of your everyday life, as it were.
Yeah.
I think people can make a change in all kinds of ways. All kinds of ways.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you, in a sense, displace in schools the idea that there's only one form of relationship which is valid?
Yeah.
That is a man-woman relationship. So that's a question of, what is the education you have in schools? How do you in schools take on board the idea that, if a child wants to have long hair, right? It's not only a question of discipline. It's also a question of identity and selfhood. The child may be striving to express his or her sense of who he or she is. And by saying that no, rigidly saying that no, you must only wear this kind, you must only keep your hair short, etc., you might be actually impairing something which is very important. It's not just a style statement the child may be making, it's a question of identity. This is who I am.
Yeah.
So you have to be sensitive to that dimension in schools. Then I think in the other place, of course, is in workplace conversations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you're in your workplace, don't assume that everybody around you is straight.
Yeah.
How's your wife? How long have you been married? Maybe you don't have a wife,
Yeah.
How's your partner? Is a simple way of
How's your partner?
it.
Yeah, very gender neutral. Yeah. Nice one. Okay. Workplace is one more place. Where else?
Workplace.
As an individual.
Okay, as an
individual, what can you do? Like today, they're listening to our conversation. What can they do from tomorrow to just be more open and accepting?
I think open to the idea that sexuality is not just out there.
Yeah.
It could be in here as well. That people in your intimate family could be gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. And sometimes there might be that uncle who's never been married or the aunt who's never been married, etc., right?
Yeah.
So it's for you to look around you and say, who are the people you have never seen in your own lives? People you love, people who are part of your family. So it's a question of I think, in a sense, opening the third eye kind of thing, right? You say, hey, what have I not seen?
Superb. So you're just saying that if we just drop our assumptions that everyone around us is straight and the pride community is somewhere where no one can see them. No, they are within your vicinity. You just have to show them that you are open and willing, and you will see more of them because they are everywhere, because they are just like you and me.
Yeah, exactly.
Superb. Okay. Okay, this is a very important question. And I really wanted to ask you this. Have you ever wondered why there is a lack of acceptance? Why was there a need to stop all of this?
Because the way you look at it, you understand it in terms of the dynamic of power, right? You think of power, you say that caste is a form of power, class is a form of power, and sexuality is a form of power as well. And the reason why people still face a problem is because they work within the framework of a kind of sexual hierarchy. Gail Rubin has a wonderful piece where she talks about the idea of a sexual hierarchy.
Sexual hierarchy is the first time I'm coming across. So yeah, feel free to tell me everything.
At the top of the sexual hierarchy are the married heterosexual couples, and little below them maybe the unmarried heterosexual couples. Below that maybe the verging of respectability, maybe the gay or lesbian couples, and at the very bottom might be the single, the sex workers, single people, etc., who are not necessarily within monogamous one-to-one relationships. And the sexual hierarchy works in a way that every layer looks down upon the layer below them. So the reason why people still face a problem, because sexuality is the exercise of certain form of power, and power, some people have the power, other people don't.
Okay, that's an eye opener. I never thought about this hierarchy that you just explained, but subconsciously we all know that is the hierarchy. That is how the world works. I hope that this opens up the conversation of dropping the hierarchy. Everyone now sits equal. No one's missing anything. Okay, one last question for you. If you could rewrite one law, just make up a law, a new one, what would that be?
Yeah, what you're asking is if today one was in a position to draft a law, how do you draft the law? Right? And I think the answer is very clear, because as lawyers we know that the supreme law is the Constitution. So you redraft the Constitution in such a way that the non-discrimination clause has non-discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. Point one. Second, you redraft the laws with respect to recognition of marriage, and you say that marriage is marriage with any two persons, not based on sex of one or the other. And third, you redraft the laws with respect to sexual violence, and so you have to protect all persons from sexual violence.
Superb. Thank you so much for giving us such eye-opener concepts, and coming down here all the way to Red FM and taking out time out of your busy schedule to be here. We're really grateful that you could join us at this Pride special, which is called I Wish You Knew. And just to wrap up, is there something else that you wished people knew?
Just maybe a poem which I'm very fond of quoting, which I should quote now, which is a poem by a Black American gay poet called Langston Hughes. He says, the poem is titled, What Happens to a Dream Deferred? The way it goes is like this. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Does it run like stinking meat? Or does it explode? So the idea is really this, that when adversity faces you, when the law is against you, you have to hold on and say, the idea of equality is only a dream deferred, and it will explode.
Superb. With that, we come to the end of this segment. Once again, thank you so much for being here. This is Superhits 93.5 Red FM. Stay tuned for more music. Bajate raho.
बजाते रहो